Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm super excited today because I have a really unique and interesting guest and a really special guest for everybody today. And just to kind of give you an idea of who this person is and some things to kind of list off on his resume before we introduce him. So, this is a $250 million producer in real estate. He has owned over 9 businesses in his career and has actually sold over $2 million in revenue selling knives. So imagine transferring that skill over to selling real estate. He's also owned a 7-figure flipping business, and he is a Tony Robbins platinum partner. So I can't wait to hear those stories. But without further ado, I do want to bring on my guest, Vikram Deol. Vikram is a serial entrepreneur, and that's what we're going to be talking all about today. Is that journey and some of the stories that he can share with us. So welcome to the show, Vikram. Vikram.
That I'm pumped to be here. And after listening to that intro, I'm like, I want to listen to that guy too. Who's that guy? Because it doesn't feel so great all the time, being an entrepreneur. It's a tough road. It's a tough road.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And before we just get started here, would you mind kind of just telling us your story, kind of from your perspective, and how you got started in entrepreneurship? I kind of read your story, and it's really interesting how you got your start. But just would you mind kind of telling us your story? How you got started,
Yeah.
and how you got to this point with that resume.
Like, was it, well, there's a couple of things that have shaped my life that I've been reflecting on more and more as I'm aging gracefully, for those of you watching on YouTube. What I would say is, there's a couple of life events. One, my grandparents were farmers, so like grew up with entrepreneurs. My dad owned his own medical clinic, and so I was, whenever they try to give me a shot, I was firing the nurses on a regular basis. So I got kind of like introduced to entrepreneurship from our family at a young age. But then there's a couple things that I think kind of showed me some different paths. And our parents sent us to boarding school in India when we were in sixth and seventh grade. I was in sixth and seventh grade, and we spent 2 years there, my brother and I. And you just see like the world from a different perspective. And it's like being poor sucks. Like being rich is great. It doesn't mean you're happy, but it's better to be unhappy and rich than unhappy and poor. And like you see people struggling for basic necessities. When I was really young, my dad and we were coming, my mom, my dad and I, um, we were coming back from the airport, dropping somebody off or whatever. And there was this homeless family, and it was cold. It was raining, Central California, freezing weather. And there's like a mom, a baby, like one or two kids. And I remember I was like, Dad, can we give them some money? Or my dad pulled over, whatever. And he gives me like a $5 bill. First, he gives me $1. He's like, here, give it. I'm like, that's not enough, Dad. Like, we just bought food. It was like $30. So I had a concept of money as a child. So he's like, all right, here's a 5. So I go run to the family. I give them 5. Like, thank you so much. And then I come back to the car. I'm like, Dad, that's not even enough money for them to buy a Happy Meal. Now, I don't understand money and how to make money, but I just knew that $5 wasn't enough for a family of 3 or 4 to feed them. So my dad gave me another 20. And it's like, oh, if you don't have money, you can't give back. Like, so these little lessons, I think, like sunk into my brain where I was like, oh, I want to be able to just open my wallet and there's hundreds of dollars, right? Like my dad goes out of town, he takes thousands of dollars with him. And that's what we saw growing up. And I think like seeing money when you're a kid is super important. We didn't really talk about money, but we saw money, which I think was important. And then I just like nice shit, bro. Like I like I like to do cool things. Like I like expensive cars, and I like watches, and I like nice suits and shoes, and like cool things that I don't need a lot of things, but like in my house, like I have a hyperbaric chamber. I have like a little biohacking facility in my house, and that takes money. And so when we were young in high school, when I got back from India, I started like washing my parents' cars. My friends and I were really into cars, so we wouldn't mind spending like 3 or 4 hours in the garage. We'd drink some beers, hide like a couple of joints. Our parents would never know. We'd like polish the cars, wax them. And I remember like I was washing my aunt's car, and this is like where you learn how to add value. Like this is one of the things that I think really made us like a really good listing company. Was her car was super beat up, and the dealership said, we'll give you 8 grand. And I'm like, she came home, she was super bummed. I was like, hey, pay me $100. I'm going to detail this car. Like, detail this car. I waxed it, washed it, detailed the engine, the whole shebang. And she took it back to the dealership across the street and they offered her $14,000. So that $100 and that attention to detail and like making sure everything in the car was perfect made a huge difference. And, when we went and did listings, like one of the things that, even people will laugh at me about, my cleaner leaves, right? And then when she leaves, like I angle the chairs a certain way. I put the flowers a certain way. I put the bedding a certain way. Like I tell her how to do it, but she goes back to her old ways. And I come and I have a checklist for the cleaner. And I'm in Medellin, Colombia, and it's in Spanish. Like I translated it in Spanish for her, and we have a checklist. And she's like, one, it makes it super easy for her to do her job. So she comes in and she's in and out within 5 hours, and she's able to clean like everything. And two, she's happier because she knows what makes me happy. So that makes her feel good. And three, it's just like incredibly easy to just create that list one time. And then when she leaves, like I rearrange things the way that I like them and I redo things. And I think it's that like a level of attention to detail that that OCD-ness that gave us a lot of success when we were listing higher end properties.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were telling the story of, when you were detailing your aunt's car,
Yeah,
I'm thinking like that's like car flipping, right? Except, you just kind of translated that skill over to house flipping,
right.
right? It being $8,000, putting in the value and then flipping it for a profit. So do you think, kind of experiences like that really, kind of shaped your business moving forward? Maybe that was one of the reasons why you got into real estate, with some of those experiences in the beginning.
I got into real estate because I have a really wealthy family member that sold real estate. And if I would have just followed his model, I would be, I would own Medellin instead of like visiting Medellin. But he's like Thatch Newen, right? Like people know who
Yeah.
Thatch is. You're not going to know my uncle's name. I'm not going to put it out there, but people know Thatch. Well, they both started the same way. Both immigrants, both didn't speak English, both just knocked a bunch of doors, got lucky, kept doing it, got lucky, and then bought a bunch of real estate. And that's how they made their money. Thatch is a lot more vocal about it. And my uncle's a lot more private about it. But that's what got me into real estate. I saw a couple of other people when I was selling Cutco knives. I like one of my, this guy was a scam artist. He actually went to jail, but during the crisis of like '05, '06, '07, he was a huge part of like the mortgage fraud and shit like that. But I I saw how much money he was making. I saw the cars he was driving, and I'm like, damn, dude, this dude's selling like 10, 15 homes a week. It was insane, right? Like it was insane. And the money that he was making, like he was working in our pizza place in high school, and now he could buy my parents' house cash. Like he could buy, like when the dope cars showed up at the Mercedes dealership, he was the first person to get a call, and he would show up with cash and just, right. He was obviously fraudulent, but I saw the commissions and I was like, if I'm going to continue in sales, why not sell a high ticket item that everybody needs? And that's kind of how I progressed into real estate. But it was after flipping, after having some cell phone stores, after a couple of other adventures, that I got into sales of real estate. And it was really more of a necessity because I was going through a divorce. So I never
Right.
really wanted to sell real estate. I just wanted to flip for the rest of my life. And then going through the divorce, we didn't have any money left because all of our money was tied up in flips and our own property, that I had to do something.
Right. Yeah. And, now that you mention it, right, maybe touch on that a little bit as far as, running all these different types of businesses. And because you mentioned you had a cell phone store,
Yep.
you flipped houses, you're selling
Yeah.
knives, you were selling real estate, you got all these things kind of going on. What are some things that I guess like you were learning in like maybe like the early businesses that you started, that you're kind of applying to the next one and the next one? Because I think a lot of people, when they think business, they think one as individual boxes instead of it being kind of overall skill sets that translate over. So if you were kind of like to go back and think about some of the skill sets you developed earlier, what do you think are probably like the most important ones that are, probably across industries rather than just, industry specific that you can use, basically for the rest of your life.
So when I was 17, I graduated high school 17. I started selling Cutco at 17 that summer. And I remember I had a really good start, sold a bunch of knives, set a couple of records, like just really crushed it. And there's a few things that Cutco taught me when I was 17. One, listen to your mentor, right? Like if they have a financial benefit, they're probably going to tell you the best knowledge they have. Now, is it the best knowledge in the world? I don't know, but they're going to give you more than likely the best that they're able to if they have a financial benefit. All right. So like trust your mentor, because why would they lie to you? Because that's stupid. So don't like go. Two is follow their process, right? So they gave me a script. They said, memorize the script, memorize the referral part of the script first. Everything else is like secondary. But if you can memorize this part, you know how to cut a penny, you know how to cut leather, you know how to cut a rope, you know how to go into their kitchen and grab the knives, and you tell them to grab their phone book and put it on the desk. If you can do those like 5, 7, 8, 10 things, you can sell knives and you'll do very well, right? Is it hard? No. Is it hard to do? Yes. The third thing is just be consistent, right? We had phone time every morning from 7 a.m. to 9 o'clock. That's when we set our appointments. People would say, well, you're waking up the prospect. Well, when you're a 17, 18, 19-year-old college kid, they tend to be a little bit more lenient, right? So nowadays you're probably going to call at 8:30 or 8 o'clock, depending on who and where you're calling. But we were on the phones at 8 o'clock in the morning in our office because I was trained that 7 a.m. early bird gets a worm. Grandparents are farmers. It just makes sense. And then one of the things that my manager taught me, I remember I was dating this girl in high school. Family was well off. Went and did a demo for mom. Mom bought like the big set, bunch of gifts, bunch of this, like $2,000 worth of stuff. Right. I was like, sweet. She's like, you got to go see my mom. My mom's got a house here. She's got an RV that they spend a lot of time in. And then they got a beach house. Like mom needs at least one big set, one medium set, one small set. And I'm like, all right, cool. She's like, just tell her what I bought. Tell her what I recommend. Tell her to pick the color. You help her with the other accessories, whatever gardening shit she wants, and be done with it. So I call her up. Mom's like, yeah, come over. My daughter told me you're going to come. She said, you're super sweet. And I knock on the door. Now, me and the girl were starting having a little bit of issues, but nothing like it was like the next day, right? So nothing that mom and grandma would have heard about. I go and I knock on the door, and this old lady opens the door and she's like, oh, you don't look like the person on the phone. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, sorry, I don't know what I'm supposed to look like, but can I come in and sit at the table? And she's like, yeah, hold on. So she closes the door. She comes back in. She's like, all right, sit in the dining room table, like the formal dining room. And I'm like, okay, like, all right. Can we sit in the kitchen? She's like, no, just sit here. And then she goes into the kitchen. Then she comes out. She's like, get out of my house. And then the next day, the daughter who had referred me canceled like 80% of her order. So like I go into my office, my manager's office, and I'm like, fuck this, I quit. Like, I don't need to be treated like this. And he's like, what happened? I told him what happened. He's like, Vic, some people are just stupid in life. Like some people are just dumb. He's like, you don't hate the product. I'm like, no, I think the product's great. He's like, you don't hate me, do you? I'm like, no, I think you're awesome. That's why I'm in your office crying as a 17-year-old that feels like I got discriminated against. Right. And he's like, screw her. He's like, screw her. He's like, you have an office of people here that love you. You have an office of people here that care about you. You have me, you have your family, like screw her. And I'm like, what? He's like, screw her. And I was like, all right. He's like, let's go get lunch or coffee or something. We went for a walk right in between his meetings. We went for a walk. We hung out. And I always went to the office. I always went to the office. I would be at the office in between meetings. I'd be in the office to roll my joints. I'd be in the office drinking beers in the back parking lot. I would always be in the office, bro. People nowadays are like, oh, well, we like to work from home. I'm like, because you don't want anybody to hold you accountable. When I'm sitting in the office and I'm sitting in the bullpen and I have a really bad phone call, I got 3 of my best friends right there. Like, Vic, why'd you say that? I'm like, I don't know. What did I say? They're like, dude, you said this. I'm like, I said that? Like, yeah, no, why would I deviate off the script? Like, we have no idea. And you get that instant feedback. Like, I've always been a fan like even here in Colombia, I'm building a sales team, and I really am trying to figure out like how to find people to come to the office, which is my house, but how do we get them in the living room so that I can give them a little bit of feedback when they're making their calls? We can role play, we can skill build, because there's certain things that you just don't get by working at home. And so like I think those would be like the 5 or 6 things that I would say go from one business to the other. Like, and you're nurturing people throughout the whole process. So we would have one, like, the rich lady in town, they own the biggest carrot farm in the world. Like, well, I want to see her before somebody else does. I remember I would just track how many times I would call her. I called one lady. It was literally like 55 times because they were so wealthy. I hit them 55 times before I got the appointment. And people are like, I don't want to make 5 phone calls. So I think those things help keep you relevant and help keep you in the game.
Yep, absolutely. And just kind of listening to that story, right? I really kind of took out that point where your mentor told you that, he basically asked you, right? Do you like the product, right?
Yeah.
Like, do you like what you're doing? Do you like me, right? So basically, what he's saying there, right? What I'm seeing is, he's basically asking you to focus on the things that are good versus the things that, the negativity that's kind of out there, right? Because you're absolutely right. There's people out there, especially if you're doing sales and you're reaching a lot of different people, right? There's people out there that are just, like you said, stupid, right? They have these preconceived notions, or maybe they're going through something that, is messing with their life and they're wanting to take it out on somebody else, right? So it doesn't matter who is it that's on the other end that's being negative to you. It's more about, like you said, right? Do you like what you're doing? Do you believe in it, right? If you do, just move on to the next person, because the next person could be your very best friend.
Yeah, man. You just in business and in life, right? And my dad and I talked about this, I don't know, a long time ago, but he's like, oh, sometimes people just leave me bad reviews because my dad has a very different approach to medicine. And he's like, some people just, they think I'm out here to just sell them supplements. And he's like, but if they were to come to my house, and I said, I've seen the house. My dad's literally got supplements on every counter, his bathroom, the kitchen, his office. In his office, he's got supplements. And when he travels with a full supplement suitcase. So people are like, why do you travel so heavy, Vic? I'm like, well, look at how my dad travels. Like I learned from him things. And if they realize that he was a user of the services that he's telling them, right? But these people go home and somebody tells them like, oh, the doctor tried to sell you vitamins. Like, that's crazy. Why didn't he just give you some prescriptions and send you on your way? Different strokes for different folks. So he's got bad reviews where people like, he's trying to sell us supplements and steal our money, which isn't the case. And so, like we live in an industry that is very hard. Like selling real estate should come with a disclaimer. It should come with like a Surgeon General's warning. It's like on your real estate license, Surgeon General warns that this could kill you. You could go broke. You could waste 3 years of your life. You could get horrible information from a bunch of people. Oh, and by the way, you're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars to do it the right way. And people are going to consider you a commodity, unfortunately, because the real estate industry is super broken. So you're going to be commoditized. They're going to ask you for commissions. They're going to ask you to work for free, and they're going to ask you for a discount on the back end. It's crazy, right? Like, and they're going to blame you for everything that goes wrong. And anything that goes right, they're going to just say, oh, it was because of market factors. Anything that goes wrong, they're going to say it's your fault. So no matter what you do, you're never going to get the praise you want. So if you had childhood trauma and you're looking for words of affirmation, it's not going to come from your client as a real estate agent, because it's not going to happen, right? Like, it's just so hard to make people happy when you sell real estate. And I'm facetious because our clients adorned us with love and praise for the work we did. But it's a super hard industry. And you got to have thick skin. You got to have thick skin. You got to be willing to always learn. You got to be willing to pivot, right? And you have to be willing to go out and put yourself out there. But because if you think that, like, pick your poison as politicians. We all know who Donald Trump is. He is the absolute best at getting attention. Whether you like him or not, That man knows how to get attention, and that knows how to spin everything to make him look good. You guys had somebody tell you that, you know, you had somebody write a bad review on you, and you get into my whole world's coming to an end. Look at this guy as a case study. He's got the whole world telling him he's a piece of shit, and he still walks around like you wouldn't even know that people are talking about him. And he spins everything, right? Like, watch how people are creating engagement. Watch how people are creating stickiness online. Like, there are so many politicians out there that we can watch and follow, right? And you could take what they're doing and apply it to your business. Don't necessarily apply their like everything if you don't believe in what they're doing. But don't hate people just because the media says to hate them. Study them and learn from them. And like, why are they winning? Why are they winning the attention game? Why are they winning the sales game? Why are they winning this? Like, what are they doing? Right? Like, I don't know about you, but this podcast takes time of yours that you could be prospecting. You're in the Houston market, probably $500,000 average sales price, if not more.
Houston market, average sales price. I don't, not 500,000.
800,000.
No, no, more like half of 500,000.
Okay. Like 300,000 ish.
Yeah.
So that's a $9,000 potential commission. You spend an hour on this podcast, you spend an hour editing, you spend an hour promoting, you spend an hour doing this, an hour, that's 5 hours. If an agent who sucks did 5 hours of prospecting, that's 3 to 5 appointments. You suck, you still get one sale from that. That's $10,000. And then you nurture that sale into a long-term person. That could be $100,000. But yet you're putting this into a podcast for what? Well, I would assume that you're doing it because it makes you feel good. I would assume you're doing it because you have a long-term plan where you're looking to use this as a vehicle to help bring people into your world that might not know you, that you can then share different opportunities that you're doing with. And you probably do it because, you know, like, it gives you an idea of like what other people have done to be successful, which allows you to condense the learning curve. Because
Absolutely.
I don't think you do it because you just like wasting 5 hours of your life every week.
No, definitely not. No, I actually, podcasting is one of the best ways. And I know you run a podcast as well, so maybe you can give your take on this too, but
Yeah.
It's the best way to learn from other people that you wouldn't get the opportunity to learn from if you didn't have this, to sit down with them like we're doing right now.
Yeah, man, we have the RE Agent podcast, which we launched back in December. Me and my partner, Cody May, he runs a lead generation company. I run the Real Estate Sales Academy. So we kind of have a good synergy with, people need leads, but they don't know what to say to them. We kind of have a good marriage of being able to send people back and forth. But we, our mentor, Sharon Srivastava, said, you need to do 7 episodes a week. And I just looked at Sharon and I'm like, yeah, right, bro. Like 7 episodes a month. He's like, no, you need to launch every day for 2 years. You need to be out there every day. He's like, you will meet 700 agents. You will have 700 conversations. 700 people will know who you are. 700 people will be relevant in your world. He's like, where else can you get a hold of people that are doing $1 billion in sales, give an hour of their time openly and freely, and then share everything with you? Podcast. It's only one place. And as your podcast grows, you want Frederick Eklund, you want Ryan Serhant, you want, right, the Altman brothers, you name the big agent in your company, like, you want to get a hold of them, you want to pick their brain, right, as they say in the marketplace. You're not going to do it if you don't have a reason for them to come. If you don't have a platform, they're not going to come to you. But if you have 500,000 people or 50,000 people that happens to be their avatar as well, they're going to come share stuff with you that they wouldn't share with you, and they wouldn't even give you a time of day. It's absolutely the best. You're nailed it.
Yeah, it's so versatile as well as far as content goes.
Yeah.
I mean, the different types of content you can create from a 1 hour conversation is just, it's insane. I did the calculations as far as how much you can do. I mean, anywhere from like 13 to 20 pieces of content just from this one sit down. And I'm not even leveraging all of it. So, I mean, it's across all platforms too.
Yeah, you could probably create, I mean, just timestamps. You could probably create more if you really, really got granular with it. But imagine like 1 hour people, 15 pieces of content and a great conversation with somebody that could be a referral partner, it could be a business partner, like opening up their playbook, like on our last one today, the company that we had on, they're a real estate team that also does lead gen mail flyers, but they don't send out the postcards. They send out cards, like actual written letters to the prospects and the farm that they're working with. And so they're getting a better retention rate, a higher open rate, better conversion rate, like all these things because they just did a different approach and they opened up their playbook on how to win outside of just doing the flyers. It's like you got to do the flyers plus the local events plus this plus this plus this, and then you own that neighborhood in 12 months.
Right. Yeah. See, I mean, just different things like that, right? Just getting others, other people's playbooks, getting into what's working for them, right? And you're
Yeah.
able to share with other people as well. So now you're positioning yourself as somebody who is almost like a conveyor of information, right? Now, I always see podcasting as almost like you're becoming the media, right? Because that's really what kind of like the media does, except now it's just on a different platform, right? You're getting information from different people, you're letting them tell their stories, except now work in control of the stories instead of putting it in the hands of somebody else to be edited, if that makes sense.
Like even if you have a YouTube channel, right, and you want to go interview, like if you're an agent and you're not on YouTube, you're missing an opportunity because you don't need 10,000 subscribers. You need people that are going to reach out to you. Why are they going to reach out to you? Well, you get to share things about your community that everybody actually wants to know. Like, I really would want to know certain things about where I'm at right now. And if there was a really easy channel for me to get there and get the information, like, hey, this is where you go to do this is where you go to do that, this is where you should stop in, and this is where you should avoid, I would really want to know that. And people, real estate agents don't realize like that when you're out there creating content, like for YouTube per se, and you're building your brand, and you talk about the neighborhoods you should avoid, and you talk about the neighborhoods that are up and coming, and you talk about the neighborhoods that you would aspire to live in one day. Well, everybody wants to know that in the community. Like that's very valuable. Or if you talk about like the big events that are always happening, like, hey guys, I'm just sharing the big events that are happening in the month of April in the Scottsdale, whatever neighborhood. People want to know that. People are searching for that online all the time. Like what's going on this weekend? So if you can figure out the way, or if you become the person who's got the best market update explanation video, right? So you become the resource for the market update. If you can become the resource man, like for whatever, then people start to plug in. And when they plug into you, people don't want to change. Like people don't want to change. Like you don't go and delete your friends on Facebook very often. You don't go and audit your channels on YouTube very often. The average consumer does not change. They add more complexity, but they don't simplify and be like, all right, Vic's not my dude anymore. No, we're just going to keep him because at one point he was my dude. So I'm going to keep him around because he might become my dude again. I don't know. So I'm going to keep him around in the back, and then maybe something clicks again and we start re-engaging. But it's like, when I think of like to go back to the question of like business, I'm a firm believer, and I've said this in multiple facets over the decades. I never got into real estate to sell real estate. I got into real estate because it was an awesome product that everybody needed. And I got into it thinking, okay, how do I replicate myself? I didn't know that it was called a team. I was just building a sales business, right? Because as a Cutco manager, I had 50 reps underneath me, right? So I was training them at 17, at 18 to sell. So to me, it was like, okay, the top sales rep in the summer made, or in the year made 180,000. The top manager paid 1.2 million. Okay, well, if I want to make 1.2 million, I need to help a lot of people make 180,000. So if I can help a lot of people make 50, 60, 100, 1,000, 200,000, 300,000, I'm going to hit my goal, because it goes back to like the whole thing. Am I financially incentivized by this structure? Yes. Okay, so then why don't we build it to grow? I think an advantage that I had that a lot of people don't have, and I was talking with one of my friends who was on our podcast earlier today. He said I was a really horrible leader and I had to learn everything the hard way, because he said selling real estate and teaching people how to sell real estate are two completely different skills. And one of my clients from last year, he just dismantled his team, and I knew he was going to, and I told him he should. I said, because you don't want to hold your team to a higher standard. I said, you don't want to hold your team's feet to the fire. You don't want to hold them accountable. So when they miss the calls, they miss the training, they don't do their prospecting time, they don't show up to the office. You don't want to be the one telling them like, hey, this is your future. And so they quit, or they don't perform, and they're just there taking up your energy. And if you don't say something to them, then that becomes an anchor on your life. And it's like, if you know how to sell, but you don't know how to teach sales, you should learn how to teach, and then you should bring on a team member. But you shouldn't try to bring somebody on until you can actually give them something of value. I got a little sidetracked there with my answer.
No, I'm really glad you brought that up, man, because that is, I think that's probably the biggest disconnect, if I say so myself, in the real estate industry specifically, but also just like probably in business in general. And that's the ability to do and the ability to teach. And I have seen a lot of really successful agents and people who are really successful at what they do, not, and it's not that they're not successful, and like there's a lot of them that lead fairly successful teams, but it's just they're not able to kind of translate and, like you said, duplicate and replicate that success in their team members, right? Maybe they have a team and they're all producing at half the level they are, right? Maybe they're a $50 million producer, but they can get everybody else up to 25 million, but they can't seem to get people up to 50 million. And I think that's the biggest disconnect. And, what would you say on that as far as, that skill set, right? I know you mentioned, not even starting a team before you even adapt that skill set, but is there, anything else? Because I think these people move so fast and they're so successful, and because success comes to them so easily, it's almost like, well, why don't you get it? Right? Like, what can I say to get you to get it?
So I think this is an onion, and we have to peel back the layers. One, the team leader is probably always going to be the most driven, which is why they own the team. So if they're producing, let's just use your numbers, 50 million a year, right? They're still in production, and then they run the team. They're probably going to stay in that realm of high production until the team outproduces them. And then it makes sense for them to shift or pivot if that's what they want to do. So one is, you as a team leader, you're going to probably set the standards for your team. Two is, do you have a process for bringing people on? Is there a set curriculum that you follow? Is there a process that you follow? The same questions, looking for the same answers? Do you have pillars of, okay, they have to, like, we just interviewed Joe Velasco out of NorCal, and he's done almost $2 billion in sales in his career. Do you have when he brings team members on, it's 5 deals in the last 12 months is a bare minimum. If that agent hasn't done 5 deals in the last 12 months, the conversation doesn't happen, right? So what's the minimum standard that the agent has to perform at in order for you to bring them on? So if you don't have those pieces in place, then when you bring on an agent or a person that is not who you wanted him to be, you can't get upset, because it's kind of like going into a listing without a listing presentation. If you don't know what you're going to say, then you just say whatever comes to you. And that's probably not the best way to go win $1 million listing. So like, so the first level is, okay, I know that I'm going to set the standard so that the people underneath me are going to, there might be somebody who's super hungry, but they're probably, never going to get to my level, but they can get close. Like they can get close, but they'll probably never get there because, when it's 10 o'clock at night and the wife is like, hey, I need you home, or the husband's like, hey, I need you home, you're probably going to go because it's not your business. You're just a team member. Right. So you're going to do things because you don't want the responsibility. You want the balance. It's different. The second thing is, did you bring in the right people? Did you run a DISC assessment? Did you run a Myers-Briggs? Right? Did I do the 5 love languages on my team members? Because I want to know how they receive love and praise and how they don't, and how they give love and praise. Right? So like, I want to know how to praise them. And so I know my team members, when they're upset, I know why I upset them, because I know how to push buttons very quickly, especially as, entrepreneurs, we move fast. So I know those things about them, right? I know what makes them happy. I know what makes them sad. And I also know I know what their personality is. So me being a driver, if I'm with the person who's in high I and I'm a high D, I know that high I is gonna be like, yo, Vic, how you doing today? What's going on? And I'm gonna be like, yep, okay, great. Waking was awesome. Can we get to work? But if I go right into that, they're going to get pushed off. And if they don't realize that I'm a driver and they're talking for 45 minutes about their weekend, I'm going to get irritated. So it's important for everybody in the team to know how to communicate with one another. Then it comes to the willingness, right? So let's say you got the right people, they're in the right seats, but do they actually want what your vision is, right? Like one of my clients that I used to coach, she brought in 2 part-time agents. And I was like, you're not going to like these people. And she's like, why? I said, because you live and breathe real estate. These people show up at 12 o'clock in the afternoon and you've already done your prospecting. You've already done your door knocking. You've already done your responses. You've already done all this stuff. And you're now going from prospecting mode to client service mode. I said, so you switched, and they come in at 12 and they're like, hey, how do we call these people? And you're going to flip your wig. And 6 months go by where she's putting all of her energy into these people because they come in at 12. So then she has to stay in prospecting mode till 3. They don't produce any results. Her business drops like a bowling ball. Even though we had talked about it, she didn't know how to fire them. She wasn't willing to let them go. So she just kept them around, even though she hated it. These are all the challenges of being a team leader. And if you're not willing to do any one piece of this step, you're going to be like so many of the teams that are, there's teams that are no longer around. There are teams that did $50 million in business last year, but because they were so transactional, they were so like short-sighted. They're like, oh, we don't need to do like a mail campaign. We don't need to nurture these people. We don't need to have parties. We spend $50,000 a month on Zillow. We're chilling. We have so many leads. Well, now those leads are gone and they didn't nurture the other one. So those other people forgot about them and they didn't do the brand and they didn't work on their skills and they didn't teach their agents and they didn't do open houses and they didn't list the properties like they should have. Well, guess what? Now people see that they were just bare bones and they don't know what to do. And unfortunately, there are teams every single day going out of business, or they're firing their team members. And these are people that made 6 figures last year, mid 6 figures. And these team members are like, we don't know what to do. We don't know where to go. We don't know how to fish. Nobody taught us. We just opened doors, wrote offers, opened doors, wrote offers. And now that's gone and we're screwed. Like, what do we do?
Yeah. I mean, do you think that's one of the reasons why a lot of real estate agents don't seem to ever get out of production? And I think, the more successful they are in production, the less likely they are to get out of it, because there's just they're always in production. They always know exactly what to do. They're very, driven, and they want to move forward fairly quickly, but they can't seem to slow down and maybe translate the skill sets over. Maybe they don't like again, like we were talking about earlier, they're successful, but they don't know why or how.
I think a lot of people that are successful in real estate, they just created a system that works for them. And just because a system works for you doesn't mean it's replicatable, right? Like, you have to teach. So like inside, like what I do now, my new business is teaching real estate agents sales skills, the soft skills, the hard skills, right? But if you don't know how to modulate your tonality, right? So like my speaking voice when I'm speaking to you on a podcast is very different than if I was calling a prospect. I communicate differently when I'm on a stage like this versus when I'm on a phone call to, Mr. and Mrs. prospect or Mr. and Mrs. real estate agent. And if you don't know what's triggering the other person, then it's impossible for you to change. Like, there's some things that real estate agents say that you should never say. It's the F word. It's the F phrase. Hey, I'm just calling a follow up. Like, what the does that even mean? Follow up on what? I don't remember you. Like, you think that you're so important that these people remember you with their 3 kids, their dog that's got to go to the hospital because it ate some weird thing in the yard and it's crapping everywhere. The kid that just fell down the stairs and broke his tooth. Like, you think they're really concerned about you? You can have a 5-hour dinner with somebody, right? Like, we can have a 5-hour dinner with somebody, and the next morning we wake up and I'm like, oh my God, what was that person's name? I don't even know what this, and I spent 5 hours and we talked about the world and all this stuff, and I can't remember their name. And you expect people to remember you 3 months later. Hey, I'm just calling to follow up, right? Or you call, you're like super excited. Hey, how's it going, Kobe? What's up, bro? Hey man, how's your weekend? You're like, yo, who are you? Or you call and you don't want to follow a script. And so you call and you're like, hi, how are you? And you're like, who is this? Oh, it's me from the 123 real estate company. I'm just calling to see how you're doing, checking in. And every single time you do that, you get resistance from the prospect. And the prospect typically says something like, we're not buying right now. We're not in a rush. We were just browsing. We were just looking, right? This typical sales resistance because they weren't taught. And it's not necessarily the agent's fault that they weren't taught this stuff because our industry's so broken. It is your responsibility, though, when you look at your bank account and you look at your responsibilities to say, hey, I am the responsible party here. Like, I can blame the leads. I can blame the market. I can blame the interest rates. I can blame the wars. I can blame the politics. I can blame the climate control. I can blame all of that. But at the end of the day, who's responsible for the household's income? And if that's you, if you are one of the people responsible, it's your responsibility to learn the skills that's going to cause a consumer that has ChatGPT on their phone now that can look up exactly what a real estate agent's supposed to do, the exact process. It's your responsibility to make sure you can go in there and emotionally connect with these people. Otherwise, what are you doing? Like, how many agents ask the question, well, are you pre-approved yet? Oh, what's your timeline to buy? What's your timeline to be in the new home? Right? Those are all sales questions. And the prospect has been trained when they hear a sales question to do what? Like when you walk into Nordstrom's and you buy that dope fresh cap you got on and you're sitting there, you're looking at it, you want to pry it, you want to try it on. It's got the little sensor on there. And the sweet lady comes by and says, hey, sir, what brings you in today? Oh, no, I'm just looking. You're staring at the hat, you're drooling, you're salivating, it's in the case. You really want to put it on. You're like, dude, that hat is fresh. And you're literally like wanting this thing so bad. And the lady's like, oh, would you like to try? No, I'm just looking. And then about 2 minutes later, you're like, oh, do you think you could help me with that hat? And she's like, you mean the one that you've been staring at, drooling for the last 5 minutes? Yeah, no problem. I got you. Because the way that they ask the question automatically triggers a knee-jerk response answer. And it's going to be the same every time. And that's why people don't want to prospect. That's why team leaders have a challenge teaching, because they never sat down to document what works, because it takes a ton of time and energy. It's hard.
Yep, absolutely. I love that you said that. Document what's working, right? E-Myth, right? I just read the book. So if you
Yeah.
ever read it, there you go. Document what you're doing so you can provide that to the people you're bringing onto your team.
And here's something that I don't think people talk a lot about. Document what's not working as well, so that when you get into that situation down the road again, you're like, wait a minute, this happened. We tried this. It didn't work. Okay. So we know what works now. We know what doesn't work now. So let's not test with what didn't work 6 months ago. Or if we do want to test it, what pivots are we making to make sure that we're in the right ballpark? So yeah, it goes both ways. Like, you got to test what's working. You also got to know what's not working, because we tend to forget when we're busy and we go back to that stuff. And, I've had my team say, Vic, we tried that before. I'm like, no, we didn't. Like, yeah, look, here's the outcomes. I'm like, oh yeah, we documented it because it didn't work. Like, yeah, but we have a folder that's called things that don't work. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Forgot about
I
that.
love it.
Yeah. So like, it's just learning, like, you have to be a student of business if you want to be successful in business, and real estate sales is just business.
Absolutely. Well, Vic, I really appreciate you being here today and sharing your value and your time with us. And for any of our listeners who are tuning in that want to reach out to you or want to learn more about what you're doing, maybe check out your sales academy and kind of follow you on social media and listen to your podcast. What are the best ways for them to either follow you or kind of keep up with what you're doing?
Yeah, man. Thank you for the opportunity. I think you got in about 14 words. So great listening skills. Um, I would send people to Instagram. Coach
Mhm.
Vikram Deol is where you can find me. And then I have a link tree where it'll take you to the RE Agent podcast. It'll take you to information about the Real Estate Sales Academy. It'll take you to my YouTube page where we do longer form. If you really want to go get deep with us, go to the Real Estate Sales Dojo on Facebook, and there we do trainings, and we're really putting a lot more effort in there to get more resources out there for agents so that they can use what's working and succeed instead of struggling to make ends meet.
Yep. Awesome, man. We'll make sure to leave all that in the description down below. But other than that, man, is there any last, pieces of value, last tips you want to leave with us before I let you sign off here?
Dude, I honestly, like, I appreciate you for letting me come and share my story. And you guys remember, tough times don't last. Tough people do. The market's going to get tough. Maybe it's already gone through its worst in your community. Maybe it hasn't yet. The market's going to get worse. Double down, triple down, quadruple down on the things that were working. Always improve your sales skills, your communication skills, your outreach skills. And remember, like, we will get through this. And the people that get through this are going to come out as sharks on the other side. And I really want you to be a shark on the other side that's just eating all the fish. And the new agents don't even have an opportunity in your market.
Awesome, man. Love it. Thank you so much, Vic, for coming on, and see you guys on the next show. Take care.